Okay, we're rolling. Um, could you just start off telling me a little bit about your life history, how you came about here and your travels? And you seem to have taken a longer time getting here than I got to my point.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. I'm originally from the island of Mauritius. This is where I was born. I traveled to Pakistan for my undergraduate studies, came back to Mauritius, worked for a couple of years, and then came to the USA in 1993. I did my residency, my training in neurology, and so I lived at different parts of the United States for 8 years. That included Virginia, San Francisco, New York, and finally I did my neurophysiology fellowship training in Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. After that, I was very lucky to have a position here in Grand Falls as a neurologist, and since 2000 I've been here in this beautiful town.
I had the great opportunity or the great pleasure of joining you and your comrades, I guess, your friends, at a dinner. You've been putting off this celebration. Why did you decide to do this kind of a thing?
Well, in part to show my gratitude to the people of Grand Falls. Actually, it is they who have been very kind to me, and they have been very welcoming and very embracing. So at least, as I had a poster over there, we should compete with each other in goodness. And it's a way of putting that command of God into action. If they walk one step towards me, I try my level best to walk 10 steps towards them. So that's why I like to involve them in our celebration, and it gives them the opportunity to know me, to know my religion, and to know the beauties that exist and the commonalities that exist between all of us.
Mm. Now, you're a Muslim, but most Newfoundlanders are familiar with Sunni and Shiite, but you come from a different sect.
Yes, I am Muslim,
Yep.
and I belong to the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. In fact, I'm the president of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community for Newfoundland. All Muslims believe in the basic teachings of Islam, which are the 5 pillars of Islam, which is the credo of Islam, number 1, that is to believe that there is one God and Muhammad is his messenger. The second is to pray 5 times a day. The third is to fast during the month of Ramadan. The fourth pillar of Islam is to pay the taxes for the needy and the poor. And the fifth pillar, if one has the opportunity, is to perform the pilgrimage in Mecca. So this is common to all Muslims. But what differentiates me with the rest of the Muslims is in a prophecy of the Prophet of Islam about the latter days, when the Messiah will appear to reform mankind. So all Muslims are waiting for a Messiah. They say the prophecy hasn't yet been fulfilled, but the people of the Ahmadiyya community, they believe that the prophecy has been fulfilled, and they have accepted the Messiah, and that what differentiates us essentially from the rest of the Muslim world. So it's more in the fulfillment of a prophecy.
Okay. Okay, they're waiting for the Messiah to come.
They are waiting for the Messiah to come.
And you believe he's already...
And we believe he's already come.
In?
And in the name of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian. And he has brought a great spiritual revolution. And because of that difference, many other differences erupt. For example, on the question of holy war. For the last 100 years, the Ahmadiyya community has been always saying that there is no place for compulsion in matters of faith. There is no place for physical holy war where you fight with somebody just because of a different belief. In fact, jihad, as everybody knows now, it's a very familiar term. Essentially, it means you have to fight against the ills of your own self. This is the greatest jihad. And the other jihad, if there is persecution because of faith, then you have a right to defend yourself. Apart from that, there is no other jihad that we know of. But this is what we have been saying for the last 100 years. And this is now what we see the world is agreeing to.
Mm-hmm.
And
But some Muslims are not agreeing to this.
yes, some Muslims, they don't agree. They have a right not to agree, but then they get into problems wherever they go. Because if they have to live in different countries, which are non-Muslim countries, for example, if a Muslim lives in Canada, you cannot go and try to fight with the people because they have a different belief than you. But you have to obey the law of the land. And so how will you perform your jihad over here if this is what you understand by jihad? So then this will create more problem for them. And we try our best to reason with them and to explain that our position to them.
What else? Louis gave me a bunch of questions to ask you about.
That's fine.
Oh, we wanted to ask, what is the position of women in Islam?
I'm sorry, I
The
didn't.
position of women. Like we know, if you read the Quran, women have an equal right and position in it. But some feminists would argue that in many Muslim societies, women are not treated equally. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes. First of all, every human being is equal in the sight of God. And in Islam, men and women, they all have equal rights. Having said that, I must mention that there is a difference of constituency between men and women. Our anatomy is different. And because of that, our responsibilities become different. So, bearing that in mind, then things take a different shape. For example, men cannot bear children for 9 months. They cannot feed a child. They cannot breastfeed a child. So their constituency is different. Men are stronger physically than women in general. So taking all that into consideration, the way we behave with women, we don't put the financial responsibility on their head. If a man can afford, it is appropriate that his wife stays home and educate the children, because mothers are eventually the mothers of the nations. So as far as rights are concerned, women have equal rights. But as I said, if we have the choice, we would like them to take care of the children and leave the responsibility of going out to work and bringing the money to the house to the husband. But of course there are exceptions. We need women in the workforce. We like to have women as gynecologists. We like to have women as teachers, as doctors. So but their priority, if possible, should be for their children, if they can afford that. So this is why some feminists think that Islam is unjust towards women. Islam is not unjust towards women, but many Muslims are.
Can you expand on that?
Many Muslims are because they have unfortunately abused of the facilities that have been given to them in the Holy Quran. For example, as you know, in Islam, a man is allowed to marry more than one woman, but this is under special circumstances, especially in the time of war, where mostly men die, and to protect women, Islam has allowed a man under such circumstance to marry a second wife. But you would see many people, they don't behave properly in other issues, But when it comes to the matter of marriage, they just say, oh, the Quran has allowed me to marry more than one woman. But in other aspects of their life, they don't behave as the Quran has commanded them to. So there is a dichotomy here, right? So that's why I say the Quranic law is very just, but provided the Muslims follow it as it should.
Okay, so it's not the Quran, or the teachings of Islam itself. It's certain Muslim cultures or Muslim practices in certain countries.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely.
Right. One final. Okay. You're in Canada now. How is it being a Muslim in Canada today?
I think being a Muslim in Canada is extremely easy, and far more easier than to be a Muslim in many Muslim countries. In Islam, the Quran emphasizes a lot on the concept of justice, on the concept of absolute justice, on the concept of freedom of conscience, of the freedom of practicing one faith. So the government of Canada, the Constitution of Canada, gives anybody who lives in Canada the freedom to practice their faith. There is help for those who don't have a job here in Canada. So I think it is very easy. If somebody wants to build a mosque, they just apply through the government of Canada. And as you know, there are many mosques in many cities in Canada. So when we look at the judiciary, when we look at the social programs, when we look at the transparencies, when we look at the welfare, when we look at so many aspects of life in Canada, I have a tendency to think that this is almost an Islamic country in concept. So that's why I want to mention again, if we put all the countries of the world in a circle, and the center of that circle is the ideal good governance, then to my mind, Canada is the nearest to that ideal. I don't think there's an ideal, but their record on human rights shows that. So I am very pleased to be here. They allow me to do whatever I want, provided I don't, provided it is within the law.
Mm-hmm. And so you find it, and you believe that it's easier to be in Islam, to practice your faith in Canada than it is in actually some Muslim countries.
Absolutely, because their concept of freedom of faith, the Quran says, there is no compulsion in matters of religion. This is a verse of the Holy Quran.
Yeah.
And this is exactly...
I've started reading it.
This is in the second chapter, chapter 2, verses 57. There is absolutely no compulsion in matters of faith. Right. And this is exactly what the Constitution of Canada gives to every person, whether they are Jewish, Hindus, Muslim, Christians, in Canada.
And so, okay.
So in this, we have to praise a government for the good things they do. And where they are right, we differ with the government on other issues, but we differ because the government gives us the right to differ.
Right. Which you wouldn't be allowed to do in, say, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, in some Muslim countries, they assign your faith. Despite the clear verdict of the Holy Quran that there is no compulsion in matters of faith, but they don't give you that opportunity just because they are in a majority. But if majority was to be the way people decide about the faith of others, then all prophets of God would have been proved wrong, because they all start as a minority. You just take the case of Jesus. He had only 11 disciples. But today you have billions of people who are Christians.
Right.
Right? But he started one. He didn't start with the majority. But the majority felt that he was wrong. And they tried to crucify him because of that. And the same happens at the time of Pharaoh with Moses. And the same happened at the time of the Holy Prophet. So when we read the history of prophets, what happened to Noah? The majority of his people said that he was a liar. But their force of conviction prevailed. They didn't use force. They used love, reason, argument, and finally they succeeded. So I think there is a great lesson in the history of those holy people, which we should study critically, so that we may progress like they did. Otherwise,
Muslims and Christians and Jewish people have a lot of historical similarities, don't they?
Absolutely.
In the background. Some of the prophets, for example, they all trace back to the same
yes,
origins.
As the Reverend who was present in the Eid party, he mentioned last time also, which was very important, we have more in common than what separates us. And it's very important to remember. You see, the origin, for example, common between Christian, Muslims and Jews is Prophet Abraham, and even those who came before Abraham, Noah, Enoch, Adam. But then from Abraham, he had his son Isaac. Isaac's son was Jacob. Actually, Jacob's name is Israel. This is where the name Israel comes from. And so in that line of prophet, Muslim, Christians and Jews, they all believe the same. Isaac, Joseph, then later on Moses, and so forth. And then, until the time of Jesus, when Christians believed in him, so they became Christians. Those who didn't believe in him were the Judaism. But Muslims believe in the truth of Jesus. And so there are many commonalities between Muslim, Christians and Jews. And I think if they work together for the good of humanity, the world would not be as it is today.
Yeah, if they focused in on what they had in common.
And this is what, again, the Quran teaches us. We should join force together on things that we agree, and work for the betterment of mankind. The Quran emphasizes on two things, Haququllah and Haququl Ibad, which means the right that we owe to God, and the second is the right that we owe to all His creatures, irrespective of their faith. And that includes animals also. So we have to behave kindly to all animals because they are creatures of God, and we have to behave justly and kindly to the whole of humanity. Then only we would be qualified enough to be called Muslims, which means somebody who loves peace and who extends peace to others.
How come we can't do it? I guess that's about it. You got anything else you want to add?
I thank you very much for all that you have contributed to our
I haven't done anything. So.
Our evening. We would like to meet other people and to exchange views with them in a very civilized way, because I'm sure when you meet people and you talk to them, the bond of brotherhood increases.
Communications. Yeah.
Exactly.
Communicating. Yeah. For all of our languages, we can't communicate sometimes. Well, that's fine with me.
So thank you very much.
That's great.
Okay. You think it went well? You can cut and, Yes, just 1 second. Actually, you can put it here, and then we'll interrupt. This will be edited. In 10 minutes, we'll be eating, hey? Well, because all prophets come from God, our prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, has taught us. In fact, God has mentioned in the Holy Quran that we have to believe in all the prophets of God, and we do not make distinction between any of the prophets of God. We have to obey each and every prophet of God. This is a requirement of our faith. So in this way we believe in Adam, in Enoch, in Abraham, Moses, Lot, Jesus, etc. We cannot be Muslim without being in all the prophets of God.
Perfect.